Hush for Samantha Schoech. Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you so kindly for joining us. Welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park. Look at all these faces, this is so exciting. Thank you for being here tonight. We are very happy to welcome and to celebrate the release of Samantha Schoech's story, Collection My Mother's Boyfriends. Let's give it up for Sam is joined tonight by Michelle Richmond. Let's give a hand for Michelle. So these folks need very little introduction. So I will try and be as brief as possible so we can get to the celebrating. This is a very special event for Green Apple. This is a special night for San Francisco and for San Franciscans. So thank you all for being here. It's such a treat to have a full bookstore and to have you all supporting not just independent bookstores, but this book in particular. So thank you so kindly. Very brief business. Now's a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. Please don't take a call in the middle of the event. That would be very embarrassing. Is photo taking okay? Photo taking, sure, is the answer. So there you go. Do with that what you wish. Please do check out our full event calendar online at greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season ahead of us, including the event you are currently attending. We have copies of books by both of our authors at the front register. You can find them there. And I know a lot of people in this room also pre-ordered, so thank you so much. That means so much for not only a debut author, but for a book that has yet to come out yet. It means so much in terms of sales. So thank you for doing that and for doing it from Green Apple as well, and not like a certain online retailer that I can think of. Cleaner. So thank you so much. We appreciate you. That being said, I'm sure if you wanted to get a gift for like everybody you know, you can do that here as well, and Sam would be happy to sign them. We have copies of, I believe, 2 of Michelle's titles as well, and I think she would be happy to sign those too. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the authors who are joining us tonight. First, Michelle Richmond is the New York Times bestselling author of 8 novels and story collections, including The Wonder Test, The Year of Fog, and The Marriage Pact, which is published in 31 languages. Wow. She writes about writing, travel, and books at Wandering Writer at Substack. Please give one more hand for Michelle Richmond. And last but most certainly not least, Samantha Schoech's writing has appeared in The Sun, Gettysburg Review, Travel and Leisure, New York Times, and many other publications. She's been awarded numerous residencies, a Sustainable Arts Foundation grant, and the Irma Bombeck and Anna Leffler Humorist in Residence Award. She's also a member of the San Francisco Writers Grotto. She was the founding director of Independent Bookstore Day and is now a staff writer at the New York Times Wirecutter. She lives with her bookseller husband and their kids in San Francisco. Her debut collection, My Mother's Boyfriends, is the reason we are here tonight. Let's give one more bombastic
everybody. Thank you for being here. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I love this book. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to read it yet. Has anyone? It's a wonderful book. It's a San Francisco book to its core, and that was the first thing that struck me about it. It's just, it's San Francisco from someone who knows it deeply and well. Sam's going to read for us. Right?
Yep.
She's going to read an excerpt for us first, and then I have some questions for her, and then we have time for you to ask questions as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Michelle. I kind of asked Michelle out of the blue. We knew each other peripherally through Green Apple and through the writing and book world locally, and I was just a fan of her books and her writing. And when you have to do this hideous thing called asking for blurbs when you have a book and you approach writers way more famous than you to vouch for you. And Michelle was the first person that I approached, and she's just so generous. And she blurbed my book, and then she said yes to being here tonight. So, and buy her books because they're so good. I just finished The Wonder Test, and I love that book. And talk about a local book. I was just hiking down off of down in Pescadero. And I was like, oh my God, I'm living this book. Anyway, it's a great book. So thank you for being here. And thank you all for being here. So I'm going to read just a little bit of one story. God, I'm sweating like crazy. But anyway, okay, so this is a collection of stories. There are 14 stories in here. It is not actually about my mother's boyfriends. It's about a character's mother's boyfriends in part. But they're not all related. Some of them are and some of them aren't. But I will tell you, as long as nobody tells my mom that I told you, that this is actually a picture of her on the cover, which for some reason she's kind of embarrassed about, but I think she should be proud. And that my dad took the picture, and that the cover designer, Laura Brown, is here tonight. And thank you to her for doing such a beautiful job. I love this cover. So, yeah, almost everyone who's in the acknowledgements is here tonight, and that's like really, really special for me. Okay, so this story is called A Reason for Everything, and it's actually the only story in the book that's narrated by a male narrator. I have no insight into why that is true, but oh shit, no, that's not the one I'm going to read. Sorry, I'm going to read. It is male, but I opened to the wrong page. It's called The Person I Suspect I Am. I'm cleaning out the kitchen, getting rid of all the things that make my wife gag on sight. She's sitting in the living room, and I shout out the names of things I'm unsure of. Swiss Miss hot chocolate with mini marshmallows, I yell. Ugh, Ruthie says, like a moan. I'm a little sad to see some of it go. Other things make me strangely ashamed of myself. I'm sure I bought the Swiss Miss, for example, and it seems cheap and childish and in very bad taste now that I see it among the beautifully packaged organic pastas and little jars of capers and tapenade. My wife is 2 months pregnant and hugely sick. I throw away whatever she wants me to because she's the one who has to throw up and cry and smell every foul thing usually undetectable by the human nose. Because we're 35, we're not really allowed to tell anyone about the pregnancy for a month or so. The only people who know are my brother Nick and Ruthie's best friend Isabel, and probably his girlfriend and her husband, but we aren't sure about that. It hasn't proven a difficult secret to keep. I'm the only one who knows about her retching, and sometimes as I stand over her at 4 a.m, holding her hair away from her face as she gags into the toilet bowl, I think I've never felt closer to anyone. There's a part of me that wants to keep this our secret forever. I realize, of course, that that's impossible. I'm putting the grocery bags full of the unwanted food into the garage when my phone rings. It's Nick, a day early. He's an hour away, he says, and I hear the thunder of trucks speeding by whatever roadside he's standing on. He tells me he'll be here in a bit, but he can't wait to see us. I'm smiling when I hang up the phone, but I'm suddenly feeling very rushed. I haven't seen my brother in over 9 months, since right before he left on his road trip to Costa Rica. I've received a few emails, one telling me he ate some sort of jungle rodent in El Salvador, and one telling me that he and Beth Ann broke up in Managua and that she was flying back to Seattle while he pushed on. In my mind's eye, my brother's progress down the isthmus of Central America is like a hardware store paint chip, a slowly ascending spectrum of green that begins with the mottled grassy beige of California and ends up in the brilliant emerald of the Costa Rican jungle. In the movie of his life, I hear chirping, see flashes of the psychedelic wing of some seldom-seen tropical bird. His soundtrack is a mixture of the Grateful Dead and the salsa music I sometimes listen to in the car when I'm driving alone. In the living room, I find Ruthie lying on her back on the couch with her hands resting lightly on her still flat belly. I don't care about birth defects. I just want the anti-nausea drugs, she says. How about a baked potato instead? No, thanks. Was that Nick? Yeah, he's early. He's going to be here in about an hour. My wife opens her eyes and smiles. Oh, good, she says. He'll take my mind off my goddamn stomach. Nick looks like some hippie Viking back from conquering the world. I've never been able to get used to the way he looks, and now, as if on cue, I'm once again, for the millionth time, taken aback by his height and his blondness and his pure master of the universe presence. Once in college, my girlfriend at the time was trying to soothe me during one of my many youth-induced anxiety attacks by saying, I think it's normal to feel insecure when you have a brother who looks like an absolute Greek god. Nick is dressed in baggy green pants patched here and there with brightly colored pieces of fabric. He has an intricately embroidered vest over his bare torso, and he's exceedingly tan. I find myself thinking about how easy it must be for him to get laid. We embrace in the doorway, patting each other heartily between the shoulder blades. He hangs on, giving me one of those long, earnest hugs that make men like me feel uncomfortable. Where's the little mama, he asks when we part. I'm in here, trying not to vomit. Come hug me, Ruthie yells from the couch. Nick bounds toward her on the balls of his feet like a basketball player. I close the front door and carry his bag into his room. By the time I enter the living room, Nick is sitting on the couch next to Ruthie's knees, with his hands spread out over her stomach like a diviner. They both have their eyes closed, and I stand silently, watching them, feeling as if I'm interrupting. Ruthie's eyes open, and she looks at Nick. I actually do feel better. Roger, she says, turning to me, I feel much better. Shall we try to go to lunch? Nick doesn't shower, but he does throw a t-shirt on under his vest before we leave. His truck is parked in front of the His truck is parked in front of the building. That, he says, pointing to the crumpled fender, was a very unfortunate burrow. My God, Ruthie says, playing a hand over her heart. Did you kill it? It was pretty bad. I broke both its front legs. I ended up having to shoot it and then tow it off the ditch with the truck. That was in Mexico. Beth Ann was freaked. You carried a gun, I ask? Only after Saltillo, he says, smiling. We take our car, a new champagne Subaru with leather seats. So what is it now, like a kidney bean? Nick asks Ruthie when she's buckled up. Something like that. It has a heartbeat, though. Isn't that amazing? A tiny, tiny heart the size of a poppy seed. Ruthie is twisting in her seat, looking at Nick. Can you feel it? Only if it feels like the stomach flu. She throws up every day, a couple of times, I offer. Man, Nick says, you're a brave woman. He stares out the window for a moment. You know, I spent a couple of nights in this clinic in Honduras and assisted the doctor with a birth. This lady, she was 38 and giving birth to her 14th child. When it came out, she just rolled over and shooed us away. She didn't even want to hold it. Ruthie sighs. Sometimes it seems so unfair. You know what this pregnancy cost us? $5,000. $5,000 in our sex life. Heat spreads across my chest and up to my face. I think about the night we conceived. I think it was the same night she said to me as I kissed her neck, could you maybe just try to do this quickly? I can tell I'm not going to get into it this time. In the month since the test came back positive, we have only tried sex a couple of times. We've been distracted and tired, going at each other in a perfunctory manner, and then falling asleep irritated and impatient. One morning last week, I heard Ruthie laughing, telling Isabel on the phone, I don't know what's wrong with me, but let me tell you, I would have fucked a lemon if I thought it would give me an orgasm. I haven't been able to get that picture out of my head. My wife fucking a lemon. It feels vaguely Scandinavian. Nick says, man, America's such a trip. And just when I feel the familiar tightness coming over me, just when I'm once and for all sick of my brother and his relentless coolness, we arrive at the restaurant and Nick kisses the back of my head and says, this is too cool. The day after our mother's funeral, I graduated from college. It was understood our father would not come, that he was too fragile with grief and relief to be asked to do anything. My graduation seemed trivial in the face of her big black casket and all those crying aunts and the great empty yawn of our mother's absence from the rest of our lives. I walked somberly through the ceremony while all around me my classmates cheered and passed joints and bottles of champagne. As I stepped off the stage, diploma in hand, I was surprised to see Nick there, focusing the lens of his camera on my face. I know this seems stupid now, but someday you're going to want to remember that this happened too, he said to me, clicking the shutter. We went out to a bar after that, some dive where we would not come across any celebrating graduates. We ordered hamburgers and got incredibly, dizzyingly drunk. We toasted all night, clinking the dense shot glasses of tequila together, to mom, to graduation, to dad, to brotherhood, to women, especially ones who are nice to us, to orphans, to Jackie, the family beagle, dead for 12 years. By the time I woke up in the morning feeling poisoned, perched at death's door, Nick was gone on his way to Alaska, where a fishing boat job would fall through, forcing him to spend his summer in the muck of a fish cannery, separating guts from flesh. He doesn't know how long he's staying, maybe a week, maybe 2. He sleeps in the office, which we're planning to turn into the nursery soon, even though Ruthie is reading a book on something called attachment parenting and insists the baby will sleep with us and won't need its own room for at least a couple of years. When I leave for work in the morning, Nick is still sleeping. Ruthie shushes me, tiptoeing exaggeratedly so I'll get the point. You're going to have to learn to be quiet anyway, she says, pointing to her abdomen. When I come home, I often find Nick standing barefoot in the kitchen cooking dinner. He makes single pot dishes, beans and rice flavored with curry or hot sauce or some Cajun spice he claims is a secret. Ruthie, who has subsisted on baked potatoes and cottage cheese for a month, eats slowly, taking tiny baby bites until her plate is empty. I've become accustomed to watching my wife throw up, to seeing the partially digested remains of her dinner float in the toilet bowl like mosaics. Now, when we stumble together sleepy-eyed into the bathroom, I wonder if my brother can hear us. This has become our intimate nighttime ritual, and I've started turning on the bathroom faucet full blast in the hopes of drowning out the sounds of my wife retching and of me offering helpless assurances of my love as she does so. I'm going to stop there, but just, yeah, it goes on.
Owen Wilson playing Nick, and yeah,
That's funny. I just saw some old pictures of my dad, and he looked so much like Owen Wilson.
Really?
When he was young. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This isn't about my dad at all, but
yeah.
just a thing.
Well, I was going to ask you about why you wrote one story from the point of view of a guy, but you said you have no insight into that, so I'm not going to ask you that. And I underlined the Scandinavians linen line, and I thought, I can't say that out loud, but maybe Sam will, and you did, so that's good. So this is the only one narrated by, or with a male protagonist, but all the stories are about most of the stories are about family, and their siblings. There's two stories with the main character has a better looking, or a sibling they think is better looking. But one interesting thing about this story, and I'm sure there are a lot of writers in the room probably. One thing but even if you're not a writer, you're a reader, you might be interested in this sort of thing. This story, as many of the other ones, we go through the story and all this tension builds, and then in the final paragraph, there's like sort of this, there's this, I'm not sure how to say it, like sort of you get punched in the gut with this insight and this kind of emotional revelation, something that you're not expecting. So my question to you is, when you write this story in particular, but in general as well, at what point do you begin to envision how this is going to end, or is it just you wrote 10 different endings? Like, how did you write other endings before? Because the ending is perfect. So I'm wondering if you wrote others and then came back around to sort of this emotional twist.
Yes, I mean, I write many drafts of these, and I write with no clue as to where I'm going or what I'm doing, and no insight into even necessarily the story that I'm telling. I always start with an image or a line that interests me, and then kind of figure out as I'm writing what I'm writing about. This story started because a good friend of mine told me the story of emptying out his cupboards for his very nauseated pregnant wife, and something about that image stuck with me, and I didn't know I wanted this story to turn into something about siblings, or and it turns into kind of a story about parenthood and expectations, and but I knew I liked that image, and so then you get a draft, and then maybe you figure out like, oh, this is about this tension between these brothers, and then you try and bring that up, and then you write a million flat endings, and then you think like, oh, how do these people really feel since this happened? And then you just try and get there. I don't know, and then you have a writing group who helps you.
Oh, okay. Is your writing group here?
Yeah, my writing group is here. Flew in from Boston and New York, and other members of long ago writing groups are here. And I honestly I rely on fellow writers so much the same way that you would rely on a copy editor, like they just see things you don't see because you're too used to it. And I think it's the same, structurally and plot wise and story wise and the whole thing.
Yeah. So. Well, another interesting thing, and then we'll move on from the story, but you read the part where we discover a little bit, I think more than midway through the story, that their mother died. And I think maybe that's a product of me not knowing where a story is going, is that we get sort of this to the emotional heart of the story often, like in this really striking surprising image in the middle, or somewhere, like, like we're not expecting, and it turns sort of the emotional lives of the characters. I love the way you do that. I think that's really interesting, and it's hard to do, but it probably partially comes from discovering it as you go instead of setting out knowing exactly where you're going.
I think so. And I think that I mean, this is maybe a little personal in my psychology or something, but like I kind of grew up, I had a childhood where a lot of unexpected things came at me. And I live in a world where I kind of expect like the other shoe to drop at any time or something shocking or unexpected to happen, because a lot of that happened while I was growing up in different ways. And so to me, it feels normal that like something kind of dramatic drops into an otherwise fairly regular setting or situation, yes.
While this is on my mind while I'm remembering it, you mentioned Negri's.
Oh, yeah.
Are you a Russian River kid?
I grew up, until I was 7, I grew up in Occidental, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm not from here, but my husband's family is a Russian River people, and I always think it's a thing about the Bay Area. You're either Tahoe people or you're Russian River people. Like the Russian River people, they were, well, the Irish cops and stuff. So I love the mention of Negri's and floating on the river.
We were not the Irish cops. We were the dirty hippies.
So you mentioned that your stories begin with an image. So the first story, Ascension, I can say this without giving anything away. The mother sprouts angel wings, which I was laughing in the first paragraph because all moms think that they have angel wings at some point. And so I'm wondering, where did this story come from?
Okay, so this story is kind of a ripoff. So there's a writer I really love named Stacy Richter. Have you ever read her? She's a short story writer, and she writes a lot of like slightly, I don't even want to call it magical realism because I think that turns a lot of people off, but she writes these like slightly off-kilter stories where everything's going along in this regular recognizable world that we all live on, and then all of a sudden she's like, these goddamn, one of my favorite stories of hers is called The Cavemen in the Hedges. And there's these cavemen living in the hedges in her suburban home. And so it's just like, you're like, wait, what? And I was so inspired by her ability to do that, that I just was like, I'm going to try. I write super realistic. I've always written super realistic. And I just wanted to try something. Like I'm never going to write science fiction or fantasy or anything that's like really out there because that's not, where I'm coming from. But I wanted to see if I could do something where like something kind of off kilter or slightly magical happened and like folded into a life that we would all recognize.
Yeah.
And then the angel thing, like I think you hit it exactly. Like this mother is super bitter, but like a lot of people who are super bitter, she sees she doesn't see her own role in that feeling or in that situation. Like she has an image of herself as pure goodness. And so the angel thing just made sense.
Yeah, that was a really fun story. And also because it has this controlled tension where you're waiting to see why she has angel wings and where this is going. And I love where it goes because it's not about the sweetness and light that the mother thinks she embodies.
Right.
So
she's a bit of a nightmare, that mom.
Yeah.
Like she doesn't.
There are a lot of difficult mothers in this collection. It's interesting. Like I think,
and absent fathers, by the way.
And absent fathers, and that's kind of an interesting thing because there are men throughout the collection, they're mothers and daughters, but the final story is all women and an totally absent father. So I think that was interesting. So part of the art of creating a story collection is, first of all, deciding which ones are going to go in it, and then deciding in what order you're going to place them. So I'm curious, how did you figure that out? Did you have, were your writing groups helpful in that? Your editor? How did you figure out where it begins and where it ends? Because it's not just, you don't just throw stories together in any way. There's a logic to the way they're
Yeah, so
organized?
I thought a lot about it,
Yeah.
and I didn't write. I mean, these stories, like this has taken me forever. I've been writing. I mean, the oldest story in this book, I honestly believe I started in 1997. So it's
Which one was it? Do you remember?
it's of course I'm blanking on titles, but it's the woman sleeping with the janitor.
Oh, and it's the first line is about.
Yeah.
I love that first line. Do you remember the first line of the story?
Yeah.
What's
this
the first line?
This is how I started screwing the janitor.
You don't remember the title, but you remember the first line.
It's called Sudden Fictions.
Oh, right.
I remember. But yeah, so this, I mean, it's been through many forms since then, and they've all been, but a lot of these have been in the works for a long time, and I was definitely not thinking as I wrote the individual stories about a collection, so then thinking about how to put it together so it would become a book that made sense. It does take some thought, and my old friend Kate is here, and I was I interned at Chronicle Books for the fiction editor way back in the dark ages. And one of the things I remember, probably like the only lesson I remember, is when he would put together an anthology or a collection of short stories, he's like, start with your strongest story and end with your second strongest story. So that was all I had to go on. But I just put it together in a way that made sense to me, and I knew it starts with the angel story. So it starts with a teenage girl narrating a story about her mother, and it ends with a mother narrating a story kind of about her teenage daughter. And I wanted that arc of like starting with a daughter and becoming mother, which was kind of the experience. I mean, I remain a daughter, but kind of the life I lived in since 1997 or a little bit after, but. So, and actually, when my editor bought the book, he was like, okay, but you need to write 2 more stories. Like, I don't want you to end here. So the last 2 stories in the book are very new, and they're the 2 stories written by a mother's point of view. And so that just felt like a nice arc to me. And then there's 2 stories in the middle, which are narrated by children, and they both are the same. They're 2 stories with the same characters. And those characters are my loves. I don't know. I have a lot of affection and empathy for these children in these stories, and so I gave them the middle so they could kind of sit there together and be a chunk.
Yeah, that's the Angie and Benny stories, and their mom is Sandy, and there's Carl.
I have good
That's
memory.
Those are Russian.
That's a Russian River story for sure. Yeah.
Carl is a Russian River character.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about those stories because I was wondering if you have other stories about Benny's the little brother. He's 5 in the stories, and Angie's 10. I was wondering if you have other stories about these characters, or if you had considered had you ever considered a novel with these characters, or were you considered sort of a story cycle with these characters?
Not only did I consider a novel with these characters, I actually wrote a really crappy novel with these characters. But I have a lot of experience with writing crappy novels, but this one was especially crappy because I had these characters separately in these short stories, and then I was writing a completely different book. And then I was like, oh, I think I might be able to figure out a way to fold Angie and Benny in into this novel. And I did, and it was all wrong. But I still love those characters, and I'm not necessarily done with them, and I have thought about maybe writing like a cycle of stories rather than a novel. I don't know. I'm not like at work at anything, but like I did try to like strong arm them into a novel where they didn't belong.
Yeah. Well, I like them. I hope you strong arm them
into some way.
Yeah. Benny's he's 5. It's so hard to write children without it sounding sort of pandering or bizarre. As the reader, you're thinking, I've never met a kid who's that sweet and sleeps that well and eats that well and doesn't watch TV and isn't on their iPad. Benny is so funny. He meets Carl and Carl's like, well, what do you want to do? Because Carl's taking care of the kids when their mom's away. And Benny's like, I want to learn to play cards. But he's 5.
Right. And he can't read.
Yeah. So that's really cute. I like that. What else was I going to ask you? Can I ask you some sort of rapid fire questions, and we'll get back to the book?
Sure.
Okay. What is the app on your phone that you use the most?
That's so embarrassing.
No,
It's Instagram. And I really wish it wasn't. And I keep saying, like, I would quit, but I'm promoting my book, so I can't. It's ridiculous.
Do you have any apps on your phone that you pay for?
Yeah, I pay for All Trails.
Oh, yeah.
I pay for Spotify. I pay, I don't know. Oh, I pay for New York Times puzzles.
Oh, yeah.
I put myself to sleep every single night doing spelling bee, and I can't sleep until I get Genius. It's awful. So, yeah.
Okay, good. What else do I want to ask you? Mothers and daughters. So it's a big theme of the book and the complications of mother-daughter relationships. And I'm wondering, I think becoming a mom sort of naturally changed. Anyone in this room who has had a kid, been a writer, and then had a kid, whether you're mom or dad or whatever, knows that it changes the way you write in some ways. It certainly changes the time you have to write. But did becoming a mom change the way you wrote about mothers and daughters? Or were you writing about that already before you were?
I mean, I think I used to write from the daughter's perspective a lot. And then it's kind of like when I watch movies or shows now and there's like bratty kids or teenagers. I'm so on the mom side every time. I'm like, and I used to be like, that mom is such a bitch. Oh my God. And be on the teen girl side. And now it's completely switched. But yeah, I think it just, before you have kids or, before I was like a real grown up, I just didn't have that perspective. I only had the daughter perspective. And I was raised as the only child of a single mom. So, I come from a very intense mother-daughter relationship. And so that's, like, write what you know. That's what I know is this intense mother-daughter. I mean, I think mother-daughter relationships are intense no matter what the, no matter how your family looks. But I definitely became less interested in the younger version or the child version and more interested in the mother version, I think.
One story I love is Walking Wounded, and I think from what you said, maybe this is one of the later stories you wrote?
I honestly don't remember, if I had kids when I wrote that or not. I don't think I did, but maybe I did.
I was wondering if that was one of the ones that you added after your editor said, because that's from the mother's perspective, isn't it?
No, it's from the daughter's perspective, but it starts with the mother learning that her daughter has been in an accident, a terrible accident.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I'm getting it mixed up. I'm thinking of
Walking Wounded. You said Walking Wounded, I'm thinking, see? The titles. Thank you. Yes, that's a really new story.
I love that story, by the way.
You said wounded, and there's a story about this girl that gets in an accident. So anyway,
that's Halo.
That's Halo. You're right. So yeah, that story is definitely written way. That's one of the two. So that's one of the last two stories in the book, and both of those I wrote in the last year. Yeah. And knowing that I wanted to write from a mother's point of view, but also just coming from that point of view now. Not that they're autobiographical, but just that's the voice that is more with me now.
Yeah, that was such an interesting story to me because it's very raw, it's very propulsive, it's very sort of emotionally on edge. And I think one thing that's really cool about your writings, it's very, I'm getting the 5 minutes on. It's very tightly controlled. And this is a story that doesn't have that control, but it has a totally different kind of beauty than your other stories it's like they have a very tight weave. We only have 5 more minutes, so I'm not even going to ask you to comment on that.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you some fast questions. Where do you write?
I write on something that we call my butthole on the couch because it's an indent in my couch cushion where I sit and work. It's super not ergonomic. I also have an office at the Grotto, and I wish I went there more often, but I got lazy. But I work, I write for my job. I have a full-time job, so I work from the butthole, and then I write fiction from the butthole. But I just bought a new couch. couch, so so it's going away. But yeah, I don't. I have like where so. The place I get the most writing done, I have two places, and this is in the acknowledgments too, where I get to go and write for chunks of time every year. And one of them is in Aurora, New York. And I get to go there for 10 days every February and just sit in this amazing, beautiful house and write. And I get more writing done there in 10 days than I do probably in 6 months, honestly, especially when I was raising kids. And then the other place is Wellstone Center in the Redwoods down in Santa Cruz, which is heaven on earth. I don't even want to say it out loud because I don't want too many people to go there because I want to be able to go there whenever I want.
Is Steve here? Steve, are you here?
He is not here. But yeah, so Steve and Sarah have this insane house that they open up to writers, and it is truly my favorite place on earth. And it's like, I don't know what is in the air there, but it's just this amazing creative place. And so that's another place where I get most of my writing, my creative writing done. Just because, everybody, life, kids and job and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a wonderful place. And do you have a favorite snack while you're writing? And coffee or tea or beer or wine or what?
Ice water. Coffee in the morning, but ice water. I drink, I'm like, whatever the opposite of a camel is. I'm like very hydrated. A favorite snack while I'm writing? No, but I think about what I get to eat next constantly. Okay. So I don't know.
Do you listen to music?
I don't.
Okay.
Though there's some sort. So I was obsessed with this playlist I had on Spotify for a while, which was like instrumental Indian groove music, and that I could listen to. I can't listen to anything with lyrics. And then I got to know like the classical music I was listening too much, so then I can anticipate what's going to happen, and then I can't focus. I'm focusing on that. So I was listening to all of this like Indian groove, and I could, it was like so outside, and I loved it, and so that kind of stuff I would listen to.
Just no lyrics.
No lyrics.
Leslie Spencer. Do you listen to piano music?
Yeah, I do. I listen to.
Yeah.
Do you have music that you listen to? Like, do you have
I pretend I do. Like, I always do a playlist for every book that I don't actually listen
Someone
to.
told me to do that for this, but I can't do it for music I listen to while I wrote. I would have to do it for music that the book reminds me of or something.
I can't do lyrics. Wait, I had something. Last trip we took.
What was the last trip I took? I travel a lot. I love to travel. No, that was a long time ago.
September?
Help! What was the last trip we took? Oh, well, we go to Bolinas a lot, so I'm sure the last trip I took was to a weekend in Bolinas. The last overseas trip I took, oh my God, I spent the month of September in Italy.
I saw something right on your Instagram that you were.
Yeah.
And everybody will want to know, what are you working on now?
I don't have a very great answer for that. I'm working on a novel. I have a draft of this novel that's loosely based on the life of my grandmother, and I'm going to Aurora in February, and I am in for a huge revision. I have to take this part, down to the rafter. So that's what I'm working on, is a novel.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We didn't even get to talk about all the San Francisco stuff, the fog, the earthquakes, all that, and just like the way you describe how San Franciscans react to an earthquake and how it's sort of a badge of honor. Loved all that stuff, and I think now we go to questions. Am I right, Cara? Yes. We would like to go to questions, so just, I guess, you raise your hand and that works. Yeah. Don't be shy. I know you have friends here. Are there no friends?
Everyone here is my friend.
So you say it's a collection of stories, My Mother's Boyfriends. How many narrators do you have?
Every story has a different narrator except the two in the middle that are both narrated by the 10-year-old girl. Yeah, so they're each individual stories that kind of stand on their own, but they definitely have thematic through lines of, there's even like imagery that pops up if you'll notice a lot of halos in the book if you happen to read it that closely. But they all have different narrators. Come on, you guys, ask me something. Yes.
All right. so I'll go for your potential segue over there. When you said it was a San Francisco book, like I know this book, but I didn't really, it never occurred to me it was really a San Francisco book. I mean, I guess I can see why, but do you want to talk about that a little bit more, about why?
I think it's very much a California book, although there are stories set in other places. There's a story in Vermont, there's a story in Illinois. I mean, but I think there is something kind of Northern California about it. If you're from here, you recognize places, Russian River, like they're just these, it's set, I grew up here, so it's set here. Not all of it. And actually my editor was like, I don't want this to be just a California book. And so when I was writing the last story, I just kind of put it in Denver and Illinois. But I've been to both of those places. It wasn't like totally random, but I purposely didn't set it in California. And also it felt like maybe if I had put it in California, it would have gotten like a little bit redundant. Like all of these people live in the same place. And that wasn't the point of it. Although I do think Northern California is almost like a character in it, sort of, just because. But you might, if you're not, you're from Boston, like you don't recognize these names necessarily. So it's not the same. Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about writing, and what's your least favorite?
My favorite thing about the act of writing are those rare moments when like you really, they talk about flow and that really happens. And there are moments when you're just like so in it and it doesn't even feel, you're like living inside what you're writing. It doesn't feel effortful. It doesn't even feel like you writing. It's just, that's like, I think all artists experience that. It's a well-known thing and it does happen. And that's like, just so joyful. And you almost don't even realize it till you come out of it. I feel like you're like, oh, here I am, Samantha, sitting here writing this. But like your mind has been completely immersed in the situation of your writing. So that's the best. And everything else sucks. Not really, but like publishing sucks, promoting sucks, writing sucks a lot of the time, editing sucks. It's a lot of like grunt work. So yeah.
I'm so glad someone finally said that.
Sam, I wondered if you could talk about humor, because when we did an event together and you read your piece, you had the audience in stitches. And when
As did you.
Here, I read the first page of Ascension and laughed at the same thing Michelle did. I find that it really makes writing and life accessible, and it's obvious that I'm going to actually read this book. Will you talk a little bit about how writing works for you when you're writing? Humor works for you when you're writing?
Yeah, so I started writing like personal essays probably in my 30s. And I think the accessibility, like for me, humor is what makes writing about human experience accessible. And I love funny writers. I love funny people. It's just where I land. And I wanted to be funny, but like you can't, I don't know, trying to be funny is tricky. So I think when I write nonfiction, when I write from my own voice, that's the voice that I have. And people who know me well, I think, recognize that voice. Like if you read my essays and then you know me, you're like, oh yeah, that tracks. But I find humor in fiction to be way harder. And people are always asking me like, what's a funny novel? And there's not that many novels or fiction in general that makes me laugh out loud, where there's tons of nonfiction essayists that, crack me up to no end. So I think it's much harder to be funny in fiction. And I don't think I'm as funny in fiction as I am in essays. But yeah, that's just the voice I ended up with. Like, I don't know. And that I like as a reader too.
So what was the genesis of this whole project? I mean, when did you say I want to do this, or did somebody say you should do this?
Well, I've been there are stories I said that were, really, really old, that I started. I've been writing stories since, undergrad, like since my 20s and earlier probably. I've been writing stories all my life really, but like seriously since I was in college. And I have like the longest, saddest, most pathetic publication story you could ever hear, and I won't go into it, but I will say that I had a collection of stories when I came out of grad school, and I got a super fancy New York agent from ICM, and he shopped the stories out to all these fancy editors, and I met all the fancy editors in New York, and everyone said, we love the stories, but we're not going to publish this, write us a novel. And so I took a year and I wrote a really shitty novel, not because I had something to say or I wanted to write a novel, but because I felt all this pressure, because that's what and also I was young and I just wanted to be published and, oh my God, 30 under 30 and all this bullshit, and that didn't matter. So I was way more hungry to be a published novelist than I was to write a book that I was proud of, and was actually good and felt like it had something real to say. And so fast forward 30 years. So this book, I've just been adding to short stories that I really like. There's plenty of short stories I've written that I don't like, but I started to have this collection, and then I started to think of it as a real collection, and then I started to shop that out. I was like, screw it if nobody wants to publish a book of short stories. I think this is a good book and I'm proud of it and I'm going to try. So I started going like alternative routes, like university presses and contests and small presses. And I submitted this book to a small press in LA, and the editor liked it but didn't accept it. And then a year later, he contacted me and said, I cannot stop thinking about your book. Is it still available? Can I read it again? And I sent it to him, and like 5 days later, he's like, let's do this. So, but mainly it became like I finally had, a book-length collection of work that I actually really believed in, like wholeheartedly. It wasn't something I was just trying to pass off so that I could be published. And, for whatever reason, it's like, I'm proud of this book. So that's how it happened.
I love hearing, and I think people love hearing about how hard it can be, and like when you're trying to write to expectations, it's so like it can just damage the entire process.
Yeah.
So I'm glad this book came to the world. We got this book. It's wonderful. We have time for one more question. Yes.
How do you sort of solicit input during like your editing phase, and how do you reconcile different opinions from your inner circle?
So one of the things that I think is like paramount is having writers and readers in your life that you know really well and you trust. You can join a writing group or send stuff to people who are your dear, dear friends, but they're not writers, or they don't share that language with you. And I'm super lucky to have this writing group that I've literally been meeting with since 2001. So we're on year 24. Like, I know their work so well. They know my work so well. We know what we're trying to do. We respect each other. We're all really practiced editors. So I just believe them. I just trust them. It's not like I'll do any change they suggest, but like, I can't quantify how, what an influence it is to have trusted readers, and I'm just lucky enough to have them. So, and I think that we know each other so well that I can be like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't want to do that, or I don't think you're right, but that's okay too. Like, nobody's going to, ultimately it's your decision, but yeah.
Thank you. Can I ask just one quick Irma Bombeck, writer in residency, what is that? Where is it?
Oh my God, you guys. I won a 3-week residency in the Dayton, Ohio Riviera. I stayed at the Dayton, Ohio Marriott for 3 weeks. It was so bizarre. It was so bizarre, you guys. But it was fun, kind of, and weird. And there were 2 winners, and the other one was this 23-year-old brilliant girl who had just graduated from Harvard. She's now a writer she writes for TV, and she's incredible. She writes for the Seth, what's his name? Myers, thank you. She's a writer for him, and she she created the new sitcom that's set here with Ted Danson, and she's just like a superstar. I adore her. But so it was like me, and I was like 48 at the time, and she was 23, and it was the two of us in the Marriott, like going down to like the Marriott breakfast with the waffle maker. It's so weird. But I got a lot of writing done.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't get a chance. I wanted to thank Cara for setting this up, and you just like run this so beautifully, and of course Green Apple and everyone and all of you for coming. And then I also wanted to say that there's champagne and there's cake, and I don't want to take cake home, so please have cake. And so, will someone cut the cake? Pete, will you cut cake? Okay, thank you.
Let's keep it going.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry. I'm not over it. I'm not over it yet. Can we get one more hand for Samantha Schoech? This was fabulous. This was super fun. I'm so excited for you. Thank you thanks for letting us celebrate your work. And Michelle, thank you for your time and your questions and sharing with us too. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you all so much.
I heard there's cake. So please do have some cake. I will just be very brief and let you know that my colleague Brendan, hi Brendan. Brendan is where Sam is going to be signing books. So if you want your book signed, that is where she will be. We have some at the front. You can find them there. Please do. We'll get the cake going in a moment. Please do have some champagne and some non-alcoholic bubbly as well. Take a look around, and if you have any questions, let me know. If not, we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
And I just say, tell me how to spell your name if you want me to sign it for you, because I'm having like an out-of-body experience. I've known you for 40 years. I'm gonna